All right, Steelers fans, welcome into the Knoll Road as the countdown to Latrobe is on. One of the most exciting things about the 2026 season, can new Steelers defensive coordinator Patrick Graham snap this defense back into what it should be? Last season was a shock. A $200 million defense was so average. What's Patrick Graham going to do to restore the Steelers' defensive dominance? And what are the other pivotal storylines that can make or break this team here in 2026? Welcome into the Sunday show. We have a special guest joining us to discuss these subjects and more. Here we go.
Then to the corner of the end zone. Oh, for a touchdown!
All right, yeah, buddy. One of my favorite follows on Steelers Twitter, 30 years of coaching as a head coach and offensive coordinator, football analyst for Fans First Sports and the Steel Curtain Network, host of the Call Sheet podcast every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, which is a must listen, a must view for Steelers fans everywhere. Here he is at KT Smith Football. Kevin Smith here with you on the channel, and a good day to you, sir. Welcome into the Knoll Road. How are you?
Appreciate it. Thanks so much. I enjoyed your intro. Good graphics there. And that Big Ben to Santonio throw in the Super Bowl, one of my all-time favorite moments as a Pittsburgh Steelers fan.
Let's go, man. All right, let's talk about what's got to happen to get the next one, right? And as I led into with that intro, your expectations for Patrick Graham. Let's start there.
Well, I think a little mystery, a little voodoo. I think you're going to see some things here that you haven't seen in a while in Pittsburgh, as far as the disguise, the post-snap rotations, and things that he's going to do to try to make life tough on opposing quarterbacks. We kind of got used to, over the last several seasons, Mike Tomlin living in a bit of a static defensive look, and there's some merits to that, but at the same time, I think it became kind of predictable. So I think Patrick Graham is going to bring back, or at least bring to Pittsburgh, a little more deception and disguise, and that'll be refreshing.
We have deception, we have disguise. I think that's almost mandatory on both sides of the football, unless you just have an incredible roster. The simulated pressures, the post-snap rotations. But, is this more Flores? Is this more Fangio? Like, what coaching tree is Patrick Graham coming off of? And what are some of your favorite buzz phrases that are being thrown around NFL podcasts these days that you believe he's going to specialize in to sort of class up this defense?
Yeah. Well, he's pulling a little more from Fangio than Flores in terms of the split safety looks, the too high shell, moving after the snap. Flores he will borrow from Flores in terms of the simulated pressures. You'll see Patrick Graham put 6 dudes at the line and make you, as an offense, try to decipher who's coming, who's falling off. He spent time with Flores in Miami and is pulling from that tree a little bit, but it's more Fangio based in that you're going to get a very similar look pre-snap much of the time, not all the time, but much of the time. And then it's going to morph into something very, very different after the snap. Maybe it's going to be cover one. Maybe it's going to be a Tampa look. Maybe they're going to give you some kind of a robber scheme. You see a lot when he was in Vegas. You see a lot of robber schemes where somebody's dropping down to rob those crossers, which everybody in the NFL loves to throw the crossers. So again, you better be, as a quarterback and an OC, you better be deep into the film study and looking for tendencies, because otherwise it's going to cause you to hold the football and take sacks.
That's the awesome thing about this is I think we become used to in our lives. I don't know, Kevin, you look about the same age as me, with some gray in our beards. We're used to these quarterbacks being around, and after year 4, year 8, 12, at some point they got all the answers to the test. But I feel like these defensive trends of making the quarterback question what he's seeing is taking some veteran quarterbacks and kind of making them look rookie-ish when the defensive game plan is really hitting.
Yeah, if you want to be really encouraged about Patrick Graham, go watch some of the games where he was the DC in Vegas when they played the Chiefs. I mean, he frustrated the heck out of Patrick Mahomes in some of those games. And it was very un-Mahomes-like to see him get antsy and get, uncertain and unsure of where exactly to go with the ball and throw into coverage at times, And so, I mean, it's easy to say, well, okay, fine. Well, why weren't the Raiders better? If Graham's so good, why weren't they better? Well, let's be honest. They stunk in terms of their talent compared to what he's going to get in Pittsburgh. He had one marquee defender in Max Crosby and a bunch of guys that probably would struggle to be starters on a lot of other NFL teams. And now he's going to inherit a defense with the biggest payroll in the NFL. I think that's reason for excitement right there. Hey, he got decent production out of one of the lowest paid rosters defensively. What can he do with the highest paid roster?
Yeah, and some of this talent that the Steelers have accumulated on the back end, I think is a huge factor here. It was very impressive, some of the defensive analytics that Patrick Graham was able to hold the Raiders at around average, considering how well below average as a collective their defensive personnel was. Their yards per rush attempt against was in the top half of the league. And, those kind of things just don't happen unless you're drawing things up at a high level with those kinds of players. Do you believe the Steelers have the personnel to execute what Patrick Graham wants to do and propel this thing back into being one of the absolute best defenses in the NFL?
I do, for the most part. I have a couple questions. The scheme he's going to run, if you want to base out of split safeties, two high safeties, then you're losing pre-snap a run fitter in the box, right? That safety is now going to play at 10 yards as opposed to 5 or 6 yards, where often you saw the defensive line under Mike Tomlin. So the onus now becomes on, one, the safeties to be quicker into their run fits. I'm confident there. I love Brisker and Elliott as a duo in terms of their run defense. But as linebackers now, you got to get off blocks. You got to fit right. You can't miss. I worry a little bit about Patrick Queen. He gambles. He can make some splash plays, but if you watch his film, there's a lot of times where he's trying to come under blocks and he misses. And without that extra run fitter, those turn into chunk plays. The one area I don't want to say I'm nervous about, but I just have a little bit of a question is, can Jalen Ramsey be that star? And now everybody's using the phrase the star position to describe your big nickel or your hybrid safety. That's so important in these types of defenses. I love Jalen Ramsey. I mean, he's like the prototype for the star, but Jalen Ramsey from 2017, 2018, is Jalen Ramsey from 2026 still going to be able to play that position?
Yeah, that's a big question. And then another question I would have is, what technique is the defensive line going to play, and will those linebackers or an older Jalen Ramsey, have offensive linemen running at them because the defensive linemen are trying to get upfield so hard? Or are we going to try to reset that line of scrimmage and 2 gap or gap and a half with them, as Christian Parker likes to say, coming off that Fangio tree? I think those things are huge. Like, are the defensive linemen just trying to go make splash plays and get upfield, or are they kind of working for that second level of defenders?
Oh, that's a great question. This is almost, I hate to hedge on that, but it's almost like, well, let's see, because you look at Fangio and he's got these monsters, like in Carter and Davis as his defensive tackles, and they can 2 gap. Steelers really aren't built like that. They're more penetrators. Even Cam Hayward, soon to be 37 years old, is still a little bit better now at getting into the gap than he is at just anchoring in and absorbing a double. So if the Steelers are going to play penetrating style defense, I would still expect them to spill off the edges where the edge players are going to come down and collision in the B gaps and try and get everything to bounce to the outside. And that's where a guy like Jalen Ramsey can use his speed, his aggressiveness, run stuff down. Queen and Wilson at the linebacker level, I think they're better playing over the top of blocks and running stuff down than they are stepping up and just taking blocks on. So I would think that they're not going to really divert from the style of play on the defensive line, because basically it's the same personnel. So why ask guys who are good as penetrators to suddenly become two gappers. I'd be surprised if they go to that style.
How much base you think we're going to see? What was it, 39% last year?
Yeah, it was under 40.
And what's your starting base front look like?
I mean, are we talking, when you say base, are we talking 3-4?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you
got to get Keanu Benton out of there, right?
Well, if you go three down linemen, who takes his spot? Is it Sebastian Joseph Day, who I really like? But yeah, Benton's not really built to be a true nose, and that's what they're kind of asking him to do when they go to base. Is Wyatt Black ready to do that? I don't know. He's got to fix his pad level. He just played too high last year. But he's also 6'6" and 335 pounds, and you can't teach that. That's a God-given gift. So if they can get him to play with a little lower pad level, then he could be that two gap guy if they want to play that style in the 3-4.
All righty. And I want to tread lightly here. I do have a ton of respect for Mike Tomlin, the way the players looked at him, what he meant to the city, leader of men and everything. How outdated did he get? How much is just like being more open-minded to modern coaching concepts that are working in the NFL, classing this thing up without even having to do anything special? Just, don't be reading the dinosaur type of stuff that Tomlin and Terrell Austin were doing. Is that fair to say about, a guy who meant so much to this organization?
I think so. I share your sentiment. Loved Mike Tomlin. I borrowed when I first became a head coach. I borrowed a lot of stuff from Mike Tomlin that I thought was great in terms of motivating, building a culture. That's a huge part of being a head coach. But schematically, you're right. I mean, I think the biggest issue that Mike Tomlin had was his failure to recognize how offenses had changed over time. That the game was changing dramatically on the offensive side of the ball. It was becoming much more horizontally based, and the Steelers were playing this like vertically based defense. Like nobody's going to beat us deep. Minka Fitzpatrick's going to sit at 18 yards deep, and he's going to take away all those vertical routes. Well, that's all well and good. You take away the splash plays, that's important. But man, did the Steelers get gashed on crossing routes and dig routes and intermediate stuff. And, I read a stat. I can't remember, and I don't want to don't quote me on it because I can't remember exactly what the numbers were, but it was like the Steelers gave up more 8-play or more drives than I think they were like 30th in the NFL, which means teams are dinking and dunking the hell out of you, and it wasn't built to defend modern offense. So this is, with these split safety looks and giving quarterbacks, a challenge pre-snap, it makes them less comfortable. Those robber schemes take away all your crossers. So I think we're going to see a significant step forward.
Okay. Now, what do you think if we project, what are we looking at? 10 months out from now, 9 months out from now? It's been better, right? But looking at this Steelers group, like I think Albert Breer is going viral this weekend for saying the Steelers are a potential dumpster fire. It's an older group. You brought in Jamel Dean, who's injury prone. TJ Watt, Cam Hayward already on the decline. Your linebackers are more finessed and physical. Between the tackles, you're going to get bullied again. There's not great awareness and pass defense over the middle that got the Steelers victimized. So anyway, I'm trying to paint a picture that it doesn't spring into being the best defense in the NFL again. And you're evaluating this roster. What do you think at the end of this year, the biggest needs for this Steelers defense is going to be? Is it going to be the Jalen Ramsey? We got to go get a younger star who can put his face in the fan and turn his hips and, be that guy in coverage as well.
First of all, and the national media is always dumping on the Steelers. I don't know. Every the Skip Baylesses and the Colin Cowherds of the world, they're going to win 6 games. And every year they churn out 10 wins. And I know that's unsatisfying for Steelers fans, but I got my best friend from college is a Jets fan. And he's like, trust me, man, I would trade a lot for one season as a Steelers fan just to get to 10 wins, But to your question, so the star position is where I would start because it's the most important in this defense. Now, I'll be really interested to see the development of Dalen Everett because I think Dalen Everett's got all the measurables and attributes you want in your star. Will he be tough enough as a run defender to be able to play in there? But man, he can guard slot receivers. He's 6'1" and 195 pounds. You look at his Georgia. He started 44 games at Georgia, man. That's a lot of college production at arguably the best defensive school in the country. So he's interesting to me. Could he be the star a year from now? If he can, then I think your attention goes to the defensive line and the linebacker level, right? What does Patrick Graham really want to play? I mean, he's kind of a 4-3 guy at heart. Will the Steelers transition into that? I think they're a long way away from that in terms of their personnel, but will they start maybe moving in that direction?
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting as this thing evolves and more teams like the Steelers, it's probably over half, are transitioning out of outdated coaching, and the owner or the GM has finally seen the light. This year is a big transition year for that. But how many of these small linebackers or, corners that might struggle to cover are like, you know what, I'm kind of a psycho. I can tackle pretty good. I don't mind trying to shed a guard coming at me. I want to try this star thing, and I'm willing to get in the film room, and I have good spatial awareness in coverage. And it'll be interesting to see as that opportunity comes, because some teams now believe this star should be getting more money than the outside corners. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, if you're going to commit to this style of defense, that's the marquee guy. You got to be good on the outside, but you can't make this defense work if you're not good in your nickel position, your star position. Like, think back to the Steelers 2 years ago. They had Beanie Bishop there. Yeah. And he's a guy you wanted to root for, undrafted free agent, plucky dude, but got to the playoffs and the Ravens were like, we're going to run right at that guy. And they ran for 299 yards in that playoff game. And then last year you had Brandon Echols, who was a little tougher against the run. But again, you get to the playoffs and the Texans said, we're going to throw at that guy. And Christian Kirk just lit him up, So you got to hit the sweet spot between a guy who can run with those Christian Kirks, but stick his nose in there and tackle Derrick Henry. And that is not an easy commodity to find.
No, it is not. Okay. While we're on DBs, let me ask you about Joey Porter, Mr. Kevin Smith here. Is he worth 30? How would you approach this negotiation? Do you feel like Joey Porter has established himself as one of the best corners in the game after, the season last year? It kind of looks like he's figured out how to not foul and how to cover and not give up touchdowns. I didn't have that on my bingo card last year that Joey Porter was going to be that good. After 1 year at that level, are you ready to back up the Brinks truck for him?
You almost have to take a leap of faith there, and because the way that obviously it works now is you get to 3 years in and you got to make that decision. I think they have to. I think they have to make that investment. They've shown themselves willing to give extensions to some of the guys from his draft class, Herbig and Washington, et cetera. I know they're trying to wait. Maybe they would like to see how the market plays out with some of these other guys. I think if you're the Steelers, you try to get it done as fast as you can, because if he goes out and has another big year, you wait a year. Oh yeah, he's going to break the bank, man. And you might be able to get him on a deal now at 30, which 2 years down the road looks like a bargain. When now guys are getting 36 and 38. So it's all absurd. It's all like monopoly money to me. We just talk casually about $30 million a year now, like it's no big deal. But that's the market, and what are you worth? You're worth whatever somebody's willing to pay you. So if the Steelers don't pay Joey Porter 30, I guarantee there's another team willing to do it. So if you want to keep, I think he's a CB1. I think he's a guy you can say he's our lockdown guy, and that's the going rate.
Yeah, I have to keep reminding myself it's just a percentage of the salary cap, and the salary cap is approaching $350 million. And I guess in 2030, when the new TV money comes in from your streaming services, this thing might explode even more than it did last time. So I would love it if, the Steelers just looked at it like, let's push these cap hits into the future, and as long as we can sign the checks for the total guarantees, we could build a super team here with this aging roster, push the money into the future, wait for the TV money to hit and the salary cap to go up. So I would love it if, they would really floor this thing. Let's put the pedal to the metal as the trade deadline approaches, if the defense is as good as what we're imagining it might be. And what would you imagine is the biggest need offensively? They've done a heck of a job, but when you look at the offensive side of the ball, I'm not sure right now that the offensive line is going to be good enough to put Aaron Rodgers in a position where he'll be comfortable holding onto the ball longer. So I guess I'm transitioning from defense to offense now, and the confidence level that, this thing can take a big step forward in year 2 under Aaron Rodgers with Mike McCarthy and Brian Angelico calling the shots.
Yeah. Well, the familiarity between Rodgers and McCarthy will certainly help. Just the fact that they know what to lean into with one another. Whether Rodgers has, I don't ever want to question Aaron Rodgers' toughness or anybody in the NFL's toughness. If you're in the NFL, I don't care if you're a punter, you're freaking tough. But you're also 42 years old, right? I mean, does he have the appetite to stand in there and take hits? Because if the Steelers are going to be better attacking the middle of the field in the passing game, which obviously has been a huge issue for them the last couple of years, then he's going to have to do that. So that's a big question. I like the offensive line, but what I really like is James Campen coming in to coach the offensive line. I think he is going to be a difference maker. And I think that unit will get better and better as the season goes under his guidance, and also as those young guys get a little more comfortable with one another. So I have a little more confidence that Rodgers is going to be protected better. My big question is, will that matter? Is he going to stand in there as everything's kind of collapsing around him to, make that tough throw in the middle of the field, knowing he's going to have to take a shot to do it?
Would you have brought Rodgers back?
Such a good question. Under the circumstances, like once the Steelers decided we're going all in with this older group, then I think the answer is yes. You kind of have to. You can't say we're going in with a veteran group and, we're going to see what the hell we have in Will Howard at quarterback. Those two things don't match up. So I'm okay with it. At the same time, you can't bury the lead here, man. The Steelers are probably not going to be championship caliber until they solve the quarterback question. And where that comes from or who that becomes, your guess is as good as mine.
Yeah, I was interested in seeing what could happen with Drew Aller, and let's just get that going. But then they got into the offseason workouts, and it really feels like they're taking him back to day one. Yeah. And that if a young guy is going to play on Sundays here in 2026, it would be Will Howard, unless that changes significantly in training camp. I guess they just believe Drew Aller, even though he's the higher pick, is significantly farther away from being ready for something like that.
Yeah. In my role as a football coach, I handled a lot of college recruiting, and we've had a lot of guys. Penn State, I live in New Jersey. Penn State is a big local following. Had a chance to talk to some Penn State coaches. And, the word from Penn State people about Drew Aller is that the ceiling is really high, but he's nowhere near developmentally where he needs to be to play at the NFL level right now. That Penn State, and part of it's Drew Aller, that the footwork, and that's why McCarthy's stripping it, all down and rebuilding it, that the mechanics aren't there. But a bigger problem was Penn State's playbook, which didn't really ask him to do a lot of the things that he's going to have to do in the NFL. So he kind of needs to be, I don't know if it's retrained or simply trained to be able to process at an NFL level.
I think I'm aligned with you on the offensive line when it comes to medium to long term. The collection of guys and young guys earlier in their careers that they have now. I love the pick of Ahanachor. I really like Jennings Dunker. He's got a lot of potential. And the left side now, getting into the middle part of their careers, I think that thing could be really, really good. but maybe it's 2027, 2028 before this offensive line. I don't know. Let me just ask you an open-ended question from your offensive background. How quickly can an offensive line this talented come together and, make you a winning offense with their ability to protect and road grade?
I mean, I don't think that you're going to get really high-level play out of the O-line in week one, but I absolutely think as a season goes, with the caveat being got to stay healthy, obviously. But as the season goes, I think you can improve significantly because offensive line play as a unit, so much of it is about timing, chemistry, familiarity with one another, especially in Mike McCarthy's going to run a heavy zone scheme, inside, outside zone. And the zone scheme relies on combination blocks, right? The guard and the tackle working on that 3-tech DT and then comboing him up to the backer. And being able to understand like who's chipping off, who's staying on the down team, help your teammate out by not leaving too early. All that stuff is really important. And, that's the kind of the hidden things that fans don't see. Having a guy like James Campen, I think is huge. Keeping Faltano and McCormick together. Now we're flipping them over from the right to the left this year, but we're keeping them together. I think that's big because I thought they started to build some pretty good chemistry between them. Between the two of them last year. So I would expect the line by mid-season to be playing at a pretty high level.
Do you think it's diverse enough of a call sheet in today's NFL to just run zone? Do you want pin and pull? Do you want any gap stuff, or are you feeling pretty confident here with Rico and Jalen Warren that they'll continue to be a good running game?
I mean, I love the gap game. I don't think it's outdated at all. I think that, like counter gap is enjoying a renaissance. You get on Twitter and there's like a million football guys putting up variations of counter gap because you can pair it with so many things in the RPO game and that kind of stuff. I love counter gap. You get a guy like McCormick out there as you're, like kicking the end. Or a dunker. These guys are ass kickers, man. These guys are nasty. They've got that disposition in them. Offensive linemen love gap blocks because it's a little bit less thinking and a little more like, all right, I got an angle on this dude and I'm going to just get off the ball and wash him down. And I think the Steelers are built for that. I think they're building a line with all these young guys that has a great blend of athleticism and nasty. That they can move and they finish blocks. Like you watch Ahanature, like he's a finisher. Everybody's like, oh, he's a finesse guy because he was a basketball soccer player growing up. But when you watch him play, like he blocks to the echo of the whistle. And McCormick is like that. Dunker's like that. Frazier, my God, man, that guy is going to be an all-pro in the next couple of years. And when you put all that together, to me, it's like, well, let's let them just get off the ball sometimes and run some gap schemes.
Yeah. I love how Baltimore kept you guessing. Not only is it run or pass, but what kind of a run is it? And if I try to get through this gap, am I going to get trapped and just whacked and ear holed? And I think over time, it just creates that half step of hesitancy that is all these guys need to, make the big chunk plays that are determining wins and losses almost as much as turnover differential. Okay. So speaking of putting it all together here, how key is play action? How key is under center? And of course, that goes back to the late days with Rodgers and McCarthy in Green Bay. Are you buying that this is all kumbaya between Rodgers and McCarthy, or do you think we could see a renaissance of that beef?
Well, Rodgers was a good soldier last year. He said and did all the right things. There was no drama with him. And whether or not that he and McCarthy have made their peace will be a fascinating element. But it feels like if you look at some of the video coming out of OTAs and mini camps, that there's a little more emphasis on playing from under center. I think the play action, if you're going to be an outside zone run team, which is McCarthy's favorite run play, you have to be a play action team. I mean, the whole idea of running outside zone is to stretch the defense and get them moving. Obviously in the run game, but you stretch them, you displace them from their pass drops, and now you can pull that ball out and boot back. And Rodgers is still athletic enough to run that stuff. He's not going to – where he struggles a little bit right now movement-wise is in the pocket. But when he gets out of the pocket, he's not Lamar Jackson, obviously, but he can move functionally to run the boot, the play action game. I hope we see more of it. I hope Rodgers will be open to it because I know he says he doesn't like it for the same reason Ben Roethlisberger didn't like it. They don't like turning their back on the defense and then having to reorient, but they were both good at it. So yeah, I want to see more of it.
And the numbers just show that if you're not doing it, it's kind of handicapping your offense. It's that's one of the gifts of the analytics is that we've had all these ideas for what's going to get the job done in football, and our human brains weren't sophisticated enough to really figure out if it was helping or not. And a lot of this stuff is in margins over thousands of plays. It's only going to help you 10 or 15 times. So, but you got to commit to it as this chase for explosives is on. And speaking of that, Aaron Rodgers had the second shortest time to throw in the NFL in 2025. Only Tua, with Mike McDaniels and his 2-second passing offense, was getting the ball out quicker. Is it realistic, or do you think Rodgers is at a point now where is it too worried about getting hit, too worried about getting hurt to ask him to hang on to the ball for another quarter second?
Yeah, I think that's a part of it. The concern of him as a 42-year-old NFL player. But let's be honest, man. I mean, from the time Ben Roethlisberger retired, Mike Tomlin's philosophy on offense became like, let's not lose the game on offense. And so they basically treated the middle of the field like a no-fly zone. We're not going in there. That's too risky. Interceptions happen in the middle of the field. And they didn't have the receivers, though, to win consistently on the outside. So you put that all together, what was there other than the quick passing game? And so my hope is with a different approach. You look at Dak Prescott's spray charts when he was under McCarthy in Dallas. They are using the whole field. They're attacking the middle of the field. They're pushing the ball deep. They're on the perimeter. So you get that. You get a better offensive line that should give Rodgers, even if it's a half a second. A half a second matters, in the NFL. A little bit longer to throw the ball. And now, hopefully, you can win a little more with your receivers. I mean, Pittman is a great. He's not a blazer. He doesn't do sexy things as a wide receiver, but he can read coverage. He knows how to sit down in an open zone. He knows how to sight adjust. That's all the stuff that Rodgers wants receivers to do. People have been asking, why isn't Roman Wilson on the field more? One of the biggest reasons was he couldn't make a lot of those post-snap adjustments that a guy like Pittman can. And so my hope is, and then Jeremy Bernard, I love that pick. Because I think he's like a veteran already, even though he's just a rookie in terms of his understanding of coverage and things like that. You put all these things together, and hopefully the Steelers, by using more of the field, will create more explosives.
I'm with you on Bernard, man. It's rare that you find a rookie that appears this ready to come in and make an impact. And Rodgers is one of the most difficult veteran quarterbacks to play for, but I do have confidence there. Would you have any interest in Brandon Ayuk? If things don't go well, if we're early in the season and that situation is unresolved, or maybe it's halfway through camp, you've played a preseason game and you're like, wow, Bernard's not ready. Like I think when you bring Rodgers back to that point about, hey, we're going all in with these veterans, it kind of necessitates win now. And I think Ayuk's value might be so devastated. He's not helping himself on social media. Like, I think we need to put in a wellness check for Brandon Ayuk if I'm being 100% real with you right now.
Yeah.
But when it comes to how the NFL is going to look at him, I think you could get an absolute steal for Ayuk now, and it might be, the best way of adding even more explosive offense to your team.
I mean, if we're just breaking this down from a football standpoint, then yeah, I agree. But my wife likes to say, when somebody shows you who they are, believe them. And Brandon Ayuk has shown us who he is. Will there be enough mouths to feed? That's my worry about bringing on a guy like Ayuk. Between one of the things that's nice about this particular offense is you have some options now. It's not just, hey, DK Metcalf or run the ball. It's DK Metcalf and it's Pittman and it's Bernard, who I think is going to be a day one contributor in some regard. I was at the NFL scouting combine, got to interview Jeremy Bernard. And who he really reminded me of at the podium was Emeka Egbuka. When
Okay.
2 years ago, when I was at the combine talking to Ibuka, he just talked about his craft with such depth and passion and understanding. And I was like, man, that guy's going to be an impact player right away. And then he went out and had a great rookie year. Bernard, I don't think he's on the same level in terms of being as polished as Ibuka, but his football IQ was really impressive. So, there's and then Pat Freiermuth's going to take on a bigger role. And now you got this I think it's a great two-headed monster at running back with Dowdle and Warren. That's a lot of dudes that can get touches. We haven't even mentioned Roman Wilson. What happens if he takes off? So if you bring Ayuk into that mix, you're basically saying to him, we need you to be a role player. Is Brandon Ayuk willing to do that? I just have my doubts about that.
I want to get back to the defense with you, Kev, but about 10 minutes or so ago, you said in order for this team to be a championship roster, you're going to have to figure out quarterback. And I've been meaning to circle back around to that, especially as you're going through the weapons here. And I'm like, man, they're freaking loaded. It could be top 10 defense, top 10 offense, maybe top 10 offense, top 5 defense. We just saw the Seahawks win it with Sam Darnold. We saw the Eagles win it with Jalen Hurts, who, pissed off A.J. Brown so much. He pretty much wanted out. Like, he can't read zone defenses. Like, he is one of the most limited guys. And, I'm in Dallas, and the Eagles are a huge Cowboys rival. And I'll try to be fair to any player. I'm not biased against anybody, but I wanted to predict a comment and kind of head that off at the pass. Like, objectively, he is a very Jalen Hurts is a very limited player, and obviously Bradford is. Why not Aaron Rodgers? If you get the protection that we're talking about and you can run the ball and they commit to actual play action, like I think he's going to be smart enough and capable enough athletically and with his arm to make enough plays. I feel like we saw it at times last year, but maybe he wasn't comfortable enough or desperate enough to really turn that thing loose. But, I want to believe that Aaron Rodgers in this NFL can be good enough to at least win multiple playoff games. And then it's going to come down to your matchups and who makes the most plays.
Yeah. I think any good coach figures out where the sweet spot is between what you need your quarterback to do and what your quarterback can do well. And when you look at the examples of Sam Darnold and Jalen Hurts, now he's been in the NFL 5 years as a starting quarterback. He's had 5 different offensive coordinators. Well, when he had OCs who tailored the scheme to his strengths, then that offense was great, and they leaned in on the running game and the play action game and the RPO stuff. And they didn't ask Jalen Hurts to be Matthew Stafford. We're not going to ask you to make full field reads and get to your third, progression. We're not going to ask you to do that stuff. Sam Darnold, similar thing. He struggled for years because offensive coordinators, one, couldn't teach him to read coverage, but 2, were asking him to do way too much. And then Seattle stripped it down a little bit more, and they were able to really focus on the things that he does well. If the Steelers can do that with Aaron Rodgers, find that sweet spot of, hey, here's what Aaron really excels at this point in his career, and here's 1 or 2 things, like maybe it's the play action game, that Mike McCarthy's like, look, I need you to do these things because it's going to open up the offense. Then why not? Why can't the Steelers be a top 10 offense? Because, like you just mentioned, they do have a lot of guys who they can get the ball to who can make plays.
And man, I love the depth of the ways you talk about these subjects with us here on the Knoll Road. If you're enjoying it as well out there in the audience, please hit the like button. Let us know in the comments what you think we may have missed. Let's talk football with you throughout the day. Okay, on defense, I wanted to circle back around because the Warren Sharp NFL preview is out. Third down numbers. They were one of the worst teams in the league on third in general, and then you go to third and medium. They were dead last by a pretty big gap. That's among the takeaways. Then the other thing is they were so horrible in the fourth quarter. One of the worst fourth quarter defenses this century. So, situationally, what are those parts of the game asking the Steelers defense to do that it was so ill-equipped to do in 2025? And what would give us optimism that will change here coming up in the fall?
Yeah, well, 2 things we talked about earlier in the show. One, when we mentioned how Mike Tomlin's philosophy defensively was, bend but don't break. Don't give up the deep ball. Well, that's fine. But when it's 3rd and 5, man, you got to defend the crossing route, the hitch, the slant, the curl, the intermediate stuff. And the Steelers just weren't great at it. They didn't do a great job of being able to take those types of throws away. As far as fourth quarter numbers are concerned, again, we go back to this idea of predictability. The longer the game goes, the better the offensive coordinators get at diagnosing what the Steelers are going to be in. And so now you get to the fourth quarter and they know, hey man, every time we've gotten into a bunch set, the Steelers have done this. And so if we motion out of the bunch set, they're going to run with the motion. We know we're going to get man coverage. So now we're going to run a little pick or a little rub to the bunch to exploit the man coverage. And we're going to be able to throw there. I think there was a lot of that for me. And I'll say this too, coaching is teaching. It doesn't matter what you know as a coach. It matters what you can get your players to execute at a high level. I don't know, and again, not trying to dump on any of these guys. Any NFL coach has a tremendous understanding of the game. But I don't know how great a teacher Terrell Austin was. Because you look at the blown coverages in Pittsburgh the last couple of years, and it's kind of appalling from an NFL level. For me, the best example is you go back to that Steelers-Bengals game last year, first game of between those two. There's about 2 minutes left. Cincinnati's up 33-31. It's like 3rd and 6, something like that. And the Steelers need to stop to get the ball back. Jamar Chase at that point has 15 catches in the game. He's got 15 catches. What do you need to do on that play? Cover Jamar Chase. Somehow, some way cover him. And Pittsburgh blows the coverage and they turn him loose and there's not a dude within 10 yards of him. And Cincinnati completes it first down. They kneel out the clock. That's the kind of stuff I think that doomed previous Steeler defenses that hopefully we won't see from Patrick Graham, that will let them be better on 3rd down, that will let them be better late in games.
Yeah, that was a horrible moment. Maybe the low point of 2025, wasn't it? That was just unbelievable how it kind of popped the early season momentum. That was coming out of Minnesota and Ireland, wasn't it?
I
that
think
first
so.
Bengals game. Yeah. Okay. Final topic here with Mike McCarthy. We've talked a lot about how the defensive coaching was outdated. So how do you look at Mike McCarthy from that same lens? Do you think he's one of the rare older guys like Andy Reid, like Vic Fangio, like Spags, maybe Jim Harbaugh, who can transcend the era? You've done a really nice job sort of diagramming his double post offense. There's innovation in there, isn't there? It's not like he's McVay, Shanahan, Ben Johnson innovating his balls off and showing it off with eye candy, but there's some subtle nuanced stuff in there that would suggest Mike McCarthy absolutely is paying attention and innovating as a so-called old guy in this league.
Yeah, that Dallas offense was fun to watch particularly 2023, where Dak Prescott was the runner-up in the MVP race. They were doing a ton of stuff in the RPO game. They were using motion with purpose as opposed to motion as window dressing. Like Matt Canada was considered a motion guru when he was here, but so much of that motion was just a bunch of window dressing designed to get the defense out of their run fit. And at the NFL level, defenses aren't going to be fooled by that kind of stuff. Whereas I look at McCarthy, you just referenced the double post concept. And the play I broke down on X, he motions CeeDee Lamb across the formation into the widest spot, the number 1 receiver spot, to purposely get the corner to widen. And then they release CeeDee Lamb towards the boundary, and that widens the corner even more. And meanwhile, they're running the inside post to pull out the safety. And then bam, Lamb breaks back to the post, and there's a huge window to throw into. That's a great use of motion. And so I don't know if the Steelers have had a passing game that really schemed its receivers open as well as McCarthy has in several years.
He is at KT Smith Football on Twitter, X. He is a 30-year coach and OC, football analyst on Fans First Sports and the Steel Curtain Network. And you want his podcast, The Call Sheet, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Anything else you can tell us about where our audience can find more of your stuff, Kevin?
Yeah, I started doing now on Thursdays a Steelers Chalk Talk, where we're really diving into the X and the O's. This week's episode is on why Jalen Ramsey might be the most important player on that Steelers defense, and really dives into nickel defense and the evolution of the star position, some of the things we were talking about at the beginning of the show.
We'll put the links for all that in the description down below. Please like and sub on your way out. Thanks for joining us here on the Knoll Road, Kevin. Have a great weekend.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. We'll be back soon with more Steelers long-form content. Till then, we'll see you here on the Knoll Road on the 32 Nation Network. Salute.